Hi, this is PatZi with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And wow, I've got a guest today, Richard Walter. He is a very special guest. This is a big honor to be able to talk to Professor Walter. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Patsy. What about yourself?
Okay, I'm really excited to talk to you, and that's why I introduced you as Professor Walter. If I had been lucky enough to attend one of your classes, then that would have been lovely. There, you are so famous, and everybody there's not a better professor at UCLA where you taught, of course, writing, screenwriting, and your book, The Essentials of Screenwriting, is the very best writing book, not just for
Oh, thank
screenwriters,
you.
but it's also the best book for novelists. Because if they can read your book, they will understand the art of writing and creating something that is readable and something that's watchable. So you are, to me, you are the tippy top. And as a
Well,
matter of fact,
bless your
as
heart.
I'm going to
There's a
have you back because I have your book, the original one that came out, I think,
uh-huh,
88, 89. And it's
uh-huh,
somewhere in I moved from Florida to Texas, and I still have hundreds of boxes of books to unload.
hmm
Somewhere I have it's one of the first editions, I'm sure, because I bought it right at the beginning when
uh-huh.
it
Where
first
in
came out.
Texas are you?
Austin. I'm in Austin.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Been there
And
many times. Yeah, great town.
y-
I love the Sixth Street music scene.
yeah, if ever you're here, we're going to get together because there's so much to talk about. First of all, of
Yes,
course,
I
as I said, the screenwriting.
like what you I like what you said about my screenwriting books. There is a very successful Mandarin edition, believe it or not, that is selling like 1,000 copies a month in China. And I've just signed a contract with a Russian publisher. It's going to come out there in hardcover later this year or early next. And I like what you said about it. It is last of all about screenwriting, but it's really about creative expression in general. And if I dare say so, that thing we call life.
It is. It really, if I was, and I have over the years talked about it, that when you were looking at, when people ask me questions, how do I develop character? How do I develop plot? I say, give me a break. Give me a break. Just read
You know,
essentials.
I can't resist saying that I years and years ago, I had Neil Simon as a guest in my class at UCLA talking about writing comedy. That's like having God come into a seminar in theology. And when I met him, he said to me, "Oh, hey, by the way, I read your screenwriting book." I said, "Oh my goodness, Coles to Newcastle." He said, "No, it's a very good book. You're a funny writer." I said, everybody loves a compliment, but for Neil Simon to tell you that you're a funny writer, that's especially meaningful. And then I went on to say to him, I said, imagine all the success you've known. At one time, he had 5 plays on Broadway at the same time, 3 of them in theaters that he owned. And I said, just imagine when you contemplate the success that you've enjoyed as a writer. Imagine what you might have achieved if you've had this book when you started out. Now you're laughing, and he laughed too. If he didn't laugh, I would have slashed my wrists right there on the spot.
I will tell you that I had three of my spec scripts were optioned, and
Congratulations.
they appeared in the Hollywood Reporter. To get a spec script optioned is not easy in Hollywood.
No, it certainly is not. It certainly is not.
It's not. And to have three of them and to appear in the Hollywood Reporter for a full page ad, and how expensive that is. So that was pretty good. But of course, they all went into turnaround or faced other problems. But that was an accomplishment. People sometimes think that really wasn't. Believe me, that's an accomplishment, right?
Yes, it is. It is when money changes hands for stuff that you just dreamed up and wrote down. That's not a small
And one of
accomplishment.
them was optioned twice. So, you know, that's pretty good.
Most scripts that change where money changes hands, notwithstanding that they don't get produced, it costs a lot more to actually produce the film than even to pay $1 million for a screenplay. I over my career, I have bunches of scripts that I was well paid to write by studios, but they changed hands. The management changed hands, and you get paid your money and you can live, but it is frustrating not to have that realized as a
Exactly.
actual
And
film.
I also adapted 2 books for screenplay and got paid for it. And they
Excellent.
also have they're in turnaround. You never know. So it's an experience, but that's why I can really appreciate what you write about screenwriting.
Well, thank you. And don't count out those scripts.
Oh no, you
Um,
never know.
no,
You never know.
the Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood made the movie about 25 years ago. That script was hanging around, Best Picture, Best Screenplay Oscar, and that script was hanging around at Malpaso, Clint's company, for 20 years before it got
Exactly.
produced.
Exactly.
So it ain't over till it's over.
Exactly. And well, talking about hanging around, I think Deadpan has been hanging around for a lot longer than 20 years.
Yes, I got the notion. I still remember I was with friends in Seattle and sitting around the fireplace. It was raining outside. My Seattle pals were heartbroken that it was raining, but I love I love the rain and the fire on the hearth. And I don't know, right then and there, just out of nowhere, the idea came to me. I had read, I guess, just a lot of people have read Franz Kafka's story, The Metamorphosis. It suddenly just came to me in Metamorphosis. A man wakes up as a bug. He wakes up one morning and he's a bug. I'm going to shut the door so that we can close the sound from the gardener. Oh, okay, he's back. And so the man wakes up one morning and is an insect or a bug or a cockroach, depending upon the translation from the German. If I were still at UCLA, I would say it's an homage to Kafka. But since I'm gone from the university, I'm retired from the campus, I'll say I stole it from Kafka. I thought to myself, what else could you wake up as? A fern? That doesn't sound very promising. A walrus? I don't think so. What about the world's most successful popular stand-up comedian? That sounded more promising. And since so many comedians are Jews, I decided to make it a Jew. At this time, it goes back all the way to the first oil crisis in the Middle East, 1973. There were gas lines, there were disruptions internationally in oil supplies all around the world, and Americans had to wait in line at gas stations. It would happen again in 1979 at the time of the Iranian Revolution when the Shah was ousted and the Ayatollahs installed. And at that time, because of the oil crisis, there was apparently because of it, there was an outbreak of anti-Semitism. It wasn't shootings at synagogues or arson or anything like that, but spray painting of epithets and so on. So it occurred to me, why don't I make the man who is turned into a comedian, I'll make him a Jewish comedian, and I'll make the guy who occupies that an anti-Semite, something of an anti-Semite, not a vaguely anti-Semitic guy. He's not a rapist, a murderer, or an arsonist, a Nazi, but he just has the kinds of tropes that people do have. And that's where the whole thing came from. There's an expression, and my favorite expression about Hollywood is from Dorothy Parker. Who else? She said, Hollywood is one place on earth where you could die of encouragement. I had so much encouragement for Deadpan since that time. It went through various forms and rewrites. What I never had was a nickel. I never had an offer of a contract, though I had praise. Then during the pandemic, I had a call from somebody who had been interested in the book decades ago, scores of years ago. I wanted to know what had happened with it, and it got me to thinking about it. I should take another look. If somebody's thinking that much about it after so much time, I should take another look. And I decided to have another go at it. And lo and behold, I discovered after I got it all written, and I couldn't get the attention of agents, including my own agents, who this is my 6th published book and it's my 3rd published novel. My previous novel was a bestseller for the Los Angeles Times. It earned out its advance in its first printing. It went to multiple printings in cloth and trade paper, and agents would not even return. My own agents were not interested, and other agents would not even respond to queries that I sent out. And it's because it deals with what is today a very sensitive issue, anti-Semitism. The protagonist, as I've said, is something of an anti-Semite. And this is the key topic that everybody's talking about these days, racial and religious identity. And there's a plague that has fallen across publishing, which they only want to publish safe stuff. I've always said the most hazardous course you can do in art is to try to play it safe. God
Exactly.
blessed me. I sent it to, I read in the New York Times an interview with my publisher and editor, Bernard Schweitzer of Heresy Press, which was a new press that was formed to address issues that, that made people uncomfortable. As a teacher, for example, nowadays, everybody in the classroom is supposed to be comfortable. There's this disease of comfort. Everybody has to be comfortable. I always thought it was my job as a teacher to provoke people and disturb them, upset them, and sometimes embrace views that I didn't even hold myself, just to get them to think for themselves. And what was I teaching? Screenwriting. The last thing you want is in an audience at a movie theater is that they should feel comfortable. That if you walk past a movie theater and people came out and they were sobbing, the doors open and the movie has just ended, and everybody comes out and they're just sobbing and shaking and trembling, clearly affected by this movie, would you say to yourself, oh boy, I got to see what that movie is, I don't want to see that, I don't want to? No, you would get in line immediately to see what could cause all of that. So Bernard wanted to bring discomfort back to publishing. Heresy quickly was acquired by a major New York house, Skyhorse Publishing, and so the book's been brought out twice in hardcover. It's going to be released also in Ireland for the UK and the Irish market. The oldest independent publisher in Ireland, Mercier, is going to bring it out later this year or early next. So once again, we have an example of the truth of the proposition that the only thing you know for sure is that you don't know enough for sure.
The funny thing is, when I first heard about the book and your main character, and it involved a Buick, and for anybody who might remember, Buick always had I was raised in Detroit, so we did not like, and my father was involved as a teamster, and we always had Fords. We always owned Fords. And whenever he would see a Buick, we'd pull into a parking lot and we'd see a Buick. He'd say, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Because that's the Buicks had that reputation. So tell us about your main character and why you made him a Buick dealer.
I wanted him to, again, this was inspired by the oil shortages. People were not buying Buicks. They were not buying big gas guzzles, and his franchise is failing, and he blames it on the Jews. And some friends of his, he's an amateur musician, and he rehearses with some friends of his, a small little ensemble of 3-4 players. They play Dixieland jazz, and they're supposed to have a rehearsal this night. When he shows up, they take him off. He doesn't know exactly where they're going, but they end up desecrating a synagogue. I remember back at the time there were some oil facilities that were spray painted, burn Jews, not oil, and stop Kissinger. Kissinger was the Secretary of State at that time under Nixon, and Jewish. So they go out and they spray paint this epithet on this synagogue. And we're always being told we shouldn't have stereotypes, cartoon cutouts that identify people as member of groups and so on. But I think people like me, that is to say, educated, cultured, intellectual, advantaged, privileged white guys, we don't realize that we have our own such bigotry. For example, if you think of a rural Southern sheriff, that's a bad guy among most of the people that I know. And I wanted to have a rural, backwoods Southern sheriff, a law enforcement officer who's a champion for justice and a God-fearing, loving, democratic man. And he is pursuing the comedian through trying to track down who it is who desecrated the synagogue. The rabbi who was in charge of the synagogue is trying to say, no, leave it alone. It's no big deal, and you'll just excite a lot of anti-Semitism. And the policeman is saying, no, this is America. We can't tolerate this kind of thing. So that's a reverse of what you'd expect. You'd think the rabbi would be saying, you better handle this. And the guy would say, forget about it. So, and I think that's a key to writing. Whatever you expect might happen, do the opposite of that. However you think somebody might be, make them different.
And you certainly made you made Dwight Bridges different. So tell us what happens to Dwight and where you
Well,
came up
he
with this
finds
idea.
himself, he's shutting down his business at night. There's nobody there, and nobody's buying Buicks. And as he turns out the lights, there's a whole bank of switches that different lights from inside this showroom and outside on the lot. But the last switch, and when he throws that one off, instead of the place going dark, it goes absolutely bright. And he finds himself sitting in front of a mirror in a dressing room in backstage in Vegas at a major showroom, putting on makeup, and there's a band playing in the background, and he's suddenly being led out onto stage and introduced as under another name. I call him Richie Richie, R-I-C. Yeah, there it is with a T in the second one. And when he's introduced, the people are cheering and screaming. He saw, very frightened. He makes his way up to the microphone and he says to people, "Hey, listen, I don't know what's going on here. My name is Dwight Bridges." And as he's saying it, they're saying it along with him. And I'm a Buick dealer from Hongswalla Hollow, West Virginia. And they're all saying it along with him. Apparently, he's been transformed into this comedian whose signature routine is to claim that he's the guy whom he really believes he is. So there are questions of identity right at the core of the story. And I think that's what really all narratives are about. Identity. Who am I? What's the point of it all? How did I get how do I know this is real? Haven't you ever had a dream that you thought was real, that you woke up from? Usually it's a bad dream and you're glad to wake up from it. How do we know this isn't a dream? How do we know we're not dreaming this? I've had such a good life, and I have such a good life. I never really planned it this way. When do I wake up from all of this and discover that I'm just a waiter in a deli somewhere?
Uh, it's so funny. When I first saw that you used the name Richie Richie, for a minute, just because I think of copyright all the time, I thought, oh my goodness, is he going to get sued? But then I realized, of course, they did not trademark. Alfred Harvey, who created Richie Rich, the famous cartoon, he did not trademark that name, unlike somebody smart, J.K. Rowling, who trademarked Harry Potter and nobody can use it.
Mhm.
Of course, Alfred Harvey Comics created this character of
Yes,
Richie.
I have over the years had a bunch of sidelines. My first job always was teaching. And one of my major sideline was being a professor at UCLA. It's a research institution, and the university agrees that my second priority is teaching. My first priority is the work that I do. In my case, writing. And I don't. It was always among the sidelines that I've had have been expert witness. I am an court authorized expert in copyright infringement, plagiarism, intellectual property law. I've testified in dozens and dozens of cases. I'm not an expert on the law, though I have learned a lot about it. My expertise has to do with the artistic and the creative, the aesthetic issues, the question of value. How much value did this particular writer contribute to this particular film or something like that? And I can tell you that there are few experiences more mellowing than meeting with a bunch of lawyers and having them pay you money. I can tell you that. But
That's a dream for me. I want the lawyer to pay me. I've paid enough.
there you go. But I can tell you that even Rowling, you're allowed to say Harry Potter. You can't exploit it. And even if Richie Rich came from Harvey, and I know the grandson of the of the Harvey family, I don't think there would have been a trademark issue there. I have testified in mainly copyright infringement, but also trademark cases. I named him Richie Richie because I'm Richie, and I also believe that all art is even a painting or a work of sculpture. It's really an autobiography. It's always about the artist, and in narrative expression, in storytelling, like in movies and in literature, the protagonist is the writer, himself or herself or themselves, but not only the protagonist, they are every character in the book. So I thought it'd be fun to call them a name that sounded sort of something like me.
Exactly. The funny thing is, originally, Richie Rich was perceived as a good guy, a very generous person. Over the years, it changed into a pejorative almost. That because originally Harvey planned, Richie Rich was good, generous, very thoughtful person. And then somewhere along the line, it became something you said about rich people, that a bad thing to be rich. I'm sorry.
Yes,
It's
yes.
a nice thing to be rich. I'm sorry. And most rich people are generous with their money. That's not, I think this is really, it's a shame. I'm sure Alfred Harvey would and his family are not happy with that. But now, of
You know,
course, Richie Rich with a T is going to be a Jew
there,
forever.
there, there was I think Belle Barth or somebody like that, a comedian, a woman comedian from some years ago said, "I've been rich and I've been poor, and believe me, rich is better."
Oh,
This
yeah.
is I do
Way
believe
better.
that people are resentful of richness and of wealth. And I sit around with friends of mine. We're all the immigrants, we're the children of and the grandchildren of immigrants. And we're all doctors and professors and professionals, all doing very well, living in multi-million dollar houses and having everything really that we need. We're very much an American story. And yet America has become like a dirty word and wealth is like pejorative. And I think that's most unfortunate.
It is, because most of the rich people I know, and I've known a lot, and they're very generous. They give so much. And of course, part of the thing of with Jewish people particularly is that it's a mitzvah not to talk about it. It's a mitzvah
Yes.
not to tell people that you've given to this or that. So many times when you're looking at a foundation where you're looking at a building and that says anonymous, that anonymous person, I would say 90% of the time, is Jewish, because
Mhm.
that's considered, it's giving money is a mitzvah, is a good deed, but giving
Yes,
money
it
without
is.
telling anybody is
That's
a
because
double good deed.
it's supposed to be between you and God,
Exactly.
and not public relations on the outside, which is what we're seeing so much today.
I worked on a building campaign where we were building something, and I would say almost all of the anonymous donors were Jewish people. They didn't want their name put on it, and because it is a double mitzvah, triple mitzvah if you don't say anything. So yeah,
Yes, you do good for its own sake. Yes.
that's the whole point of it. Of course, Richie Rich, now with a T, is a Jewish comedian, quite outrageous. the, the, the act, you managed to put a lot of humor in this book, because the act is very funny, and all the people around him are very funny, and all.
Thank you. Thank you. But I was trying to write, actually, I wasn't trying to do anything. I think as soon as you try to do something, you fail. If you're in the arts, just do it and then look back and you see what you did. When I look back, what I see I was trying to do was write about a very dark and grim subject, which is race hatred, religious hatred, anti-Semitism in particular, but bigotry in general. And I wanted it to be funny. I wanted people to be laughing at it. Some people will say, "Oh, you're just making light of all of that," but humor is mocking and scorning is a wonderful way to attack bigotry and prejudice.
The essence of Jewish humor is this sort of making fun of horrible things that have been happening. And this goes back all the way, I say, all the way back to the time of Josephus. Josephus had to fight the same kind of thing so long ago, where there were people who were writing terrible things about Jews and all sorts of anti-Semitic things, and he actually wrote a wonderful essay about a character named Appian, who was writing really nasty things about Jews, and again pointing out the ridiculousness of it. And so yeah, but you have to tell us some of the scenes in. I start laughing when I think, because there's two things. First of all, you have wonderful side characters that you bring into it. And tell us about the comedians. I love the part where we have, who do we have? Hal Brooks. We have all of those guys together. Oh, Milton Berle. My father was obsessed with Milton Berle, loved him. So all of that humor, all of Milton Berle's humor, I'm aware
Mm-hmm.
of.
Uncle Milty, yeah. No, it's pointed out to me that in that scene that you're talking about, which is my favorite part, my own favorite part of the book, where there's a discussion on public television among those comedians. Mel Brooks, I think people today do know who he is, but a lot of people don't know who Milton Berle was. Jerry Lewis, I guess they know who he was, maybe. And Don Rickles, I would think most people now don't know who that was. But I don't think if you know who they are and who they were, that's okay. But you don't need to know who they are to see the fun in what I think is the most ridiculous thing that ever happens in comedy, when comedians get serious and try to talk about the nature of comedy. I had believe it or not, I was a student 50 something years ago at USC Film School, and the Jerry Lewis was actually teaching directing there, and I was his teaching assistant. He also hired me to work as the dialogue director on one of his later pictures, a picture at Warner Brothers, and I got to know him pretty well. We got to be pretty good friends, and he always felt inadequate. He wasn't really formally educated, even though he's a hugely intelligent guy, a very smart man, and he would get very self-consciously profound when discussing comedy. And I was trying to capture, it sounded, I can say it now, I can't hurt his feelings because he's deceased, but it was a little ridiculous when he would get that way. And I was trying to capture that in that particular scene, and I'm glad to know that you got it.
Oh, I got it. It's funny because I lived in England for quite a few years and spent a lot of time in France. And the one person that all the French people loved, the one American every French person loved, Jerry Lewis. They'd always ask about Jerry Lewis. My mother liked Dean Martin, but French people to this day, they love Jerry Lewis.
Yes, he really was not appreciated in this country as much, and artistically and creatively, as much as he was in France. Dean Martin said once, "You're not drunk if you can lie on the floor without holding on." But they both had successes after they separated. Jerry wanted to direct. And it's funny, creative teams often, like family, they're very close and connected, and then they become estranged from one another. That in musical groups and elsewhere. But Jerry, I know he wrote a bio, an autobiography, a memoir some years ago, and he called it a love story. It was a story it was Dean and me, a love story. He wanted to make sure everybody understood that he really did love Dean. They had quite a difficult falling out years and years earlier. They were the biggest movie stars in Hollywood in the late 40s and into the early 50s.
Jerry Lewis, as a Jewish person, he was such a strong promoting Jewish people and promoting just not to be anti-Semitic, because he knew that Jews were giving so much to the industry and were doing so much. They were all great. Paul Newman was a Jew.
It's funny. When I was young and I had hair, it was blonde, it was golden blonde hair. And a lot of people think that my wife is a Jew, and she's a blonde, blue-eyed woman. My children are blonde and blue-eyed or green-eyed. And people, from time to time, I would be with people who did not know that I was a Jew and who would suddenly reveal themselves to be anti-Semites. They would just assume, and they would say something like that was anti-Semitic. I remember once a British student, when I was a student myself at SC, one of my classmates from England said, "He's got nothing against the Jews." That was his opening right away. Watch out. He says, in fact, he's actually living with a Jewish family and he's renting a room in a Jewish household. He says, they're very fine businessmen. You've got to give them that. The thing about it is they've got no sense of honor. This is what he tells me. And my whole life I've wondered, what I said in response to that was the following. I just didn't say a word. I just didn't know how to respond to that. And I've thought over the years, how should I have responded? I'm not sure that the response that I gave wasn't the right response, but you're quite right. You're quite right. People make assumptions about the way particular groups are, not just Jews. And that's where prejudice comes from. Prejudice is pre-judging. Pre is before. We all know what judging means. So we're judging before what? Before we know some person, we're judging the way they are based on the group she or he or they belong to. And that is a sickness in the human condition that has caused grotesque horror and grief and rage and destruction from the beginning of time, from before written down history.
Now, you did not give up on this book. over 50 years. You were rejected. Recently, I was talking to an author who self published his book, and he told me I was rejected. So I asked him, how many rejections? 8 times. I got eight.
I had 50 rejections on Deadpan
And
in
you're
the
who
last
you
2 years.
are. It's crazy.
We'll tell you, sometimes I think your best credential is no credential. If you've had, especially in screenwriting, I often thought the best at UCLA, the students around the table had a better chance to get work than the professor sitting at the head, because if you have a history, a record of having written screenplays that actually got made, there are going to be some that didn't work out very well. And the movie business, like all art, is idealizing and romanticizing the nature of the human condition. And they want to do that with the writers they bring in. And they can do that with a brand new virgin, so to speak, upon whom they can project the image that they want to see, that they're hoping to see down the line. And they can't do that with someone who actually has a record. So sometimes experience and a track record actually can even work against you in Hollywood and in the writing industry in general. What writers have to do is ignore all of that and just write. Every writer is an independent entrepreneur, a businessman or businesswoman, a business person, and every business has something they call inventory. And our writing is our inventory. We're the only business I can think of where we actually can sit in a room and out of nothing, just the thoughts in our head that we write down, we could create inventory. And that's what writers need to be doing. It's not a 9 to 5, 52-week gig. It's, if you're lucky, it's herky jerky, spiky. I like to tell writers that it's a privilege in Hollywood, even merely to be mistreated by
Oh,
Hollywood.
yeah.
Few people have met more artists than I have, never mind my own experience over more than half a century working in the arts, but also teaching. I've crossed paths with in the UCLA Film School. It's the glamour corner of higher learning. My students wrote 13 or 14 or 15 pictures just for Steven Spielberg. And I never met a writer, I never met an artist who was satisfied with the way it really came out. I met Julius Epstein years ago. He wrote Casablanca. And I said to him, "Oh, I'm so excited to meet you. All I or any of my film phony pals will hope for is once in our lives we should touch something bigger than we are, that's timeless and eternal, like you did with Casablanca. And wouldn't it be nice if I could report that Mr. Epstein said, oh, I thank you very much for you to say." No, he's a writer. He said, Casablanca, they screwed that up the part where he was in Hollywood for 70 years, but he never lost his Brooklyn twang. And all I could think about is, boy, I wish somebody would mess up my movie like they messed up
Exactly.
Casablanca. Yeah.
Thinking of an old timer like that, did you ever work with the Efrons?
I
Delia?
met Nora, but I never worked with them. My dear old good pal of mine, my old college roommate, a very successful writer, director, producer, Andy Bergman. He was pals with the Efrons, and I think lived near them in New York. But no, I myself did not work creatively with them, I'm sorry to say.
Delia Ephron has been on my program a number of times, of course, for her books, and we've talked about, and I've met Nora when I was in Hollywood, but their parents, now that was a writing team. When you're talking about screenwriters, those two, the dialogue is still so sharp, so good. Their movies are like 70 years old, but the dialogue is still so good.
Yes, when I look back at my favorite movies, the classics, I was on a plane and I saw Citizen Kane again. There's few things more boring than a film professor like me who thinks that Citizen Kane is the greatest movie ever made. That's what I think. So the question arises, is it as good as I remember it as the first time that I saw it? And the answer is no. It's even better than that. The classics, the really great classics, whether it's the Beatles or Beethoven or Bach, get better when we're exposed to them again and again. We see more things. My dad was a musician and he played with Toscanini. He was in the NBC Symphony Orchestra, and Toscanini, the great conductor of the 20th century, he would be looking over a score by Beethoven and he would say, I've hundreds of times I've performed this, and every time he teaches me something new. So what you're saying makes sense about those movies from 70 years ago, not only holding up, but even maybe being a little stronger.
definitely compared to some of the modern scripts that I've been watching lately or not watching. I find myself, I do find myself, I say, if there's 5 F words, that's it. I don't,
Yes.
what is the point? And they're getting
Yeah,
paid, drives me crazy.
I so agree with you. I'm a hard liner on civil liberties. I believe you have to have the right to say stupid, ugly things. Nobody has to protect your right to say, have a nice day. And nobody has to protect your right to engage in logical, rational, intelligent, intellectual, expansive, affirmative discourse. It's a stupid stuff. The downside is lousy movies. The best movie this year, that is to say that it won the Oscar, it was Nora, I think. I just hated it. And you can see they were ad libbing and it just effing, except when they use the C word, the long one. It's like they get every time they use the F word, they get an extra $5. But if they use the C word, they get like $15. It's exactly what art should not be, which is self-conscious.
They need to read your book because, as you say, dialogue, every piece of dialogue should lead to the next dialogue, which should lead to the next and the next. But if it's one constant, just bad word after another, there's no story.
I'm stunned by it. And you can see it's what I call now in what I see streaming amateur chic. Everything is too dark. It's supposed to be natural.
Thank you. Lighting. Thank
Lighting,
you for mentioning lighting.
They don't bother. They don't even light it.
They don't
and
light it.
What they say is it's authentic that way. This is authentic.
Casablanca is authentic. Look at the lighting in Casablanca. It is unbelievable. Every scene is lit so perfectly. Every angle of the camera, they just catch the right thing. The lighting is perfect, whether it's what they create with these, like the stripes, I don't know what you call it, behind some of the characters that imply a jail cell, or everything. How they light Ingrid Bergman in the dark. There are scenes in the dark. It's night, but
yes,
you can see every expression on the face of these people. I don't know what happened to them.
I am an actor. I belong to the Screen Actors Guild. I haven't pursued it. I believe the reason there were actors is there should be one group of people suffers even greater pain than writers. But I do think about my colleagues. I have actors in my family who have lines to speak, and you cannot see their faces. It's all silhouette because supposedly that's natural. But the truth is, if you were in a dark room and you're with people, you can see their faces. If you photograph it, you can't. So you have to light it. So it's not natural. It's the opposite of natural. But once again, movies should appear to be natural, but there's nothing less natural than a movie. I was just going to say, I like to tell my students over the years that in film, appearances are not important. And what I mean by that is they're not merely important, it's the whole thing. Movies don't even move. Everybody knows that it's a bunch of still pictures, one right after the next. So what is this nonsense about the authenticity and naturalness?
Yeah, if you watch Casablanca, you are sure that you were in Casablanca. You're
Yes.
100% sure you went to Casablanca for that hour and a half.
Yes. Yes.
It's funny. But now, of course, you probably, you're as a film guy, you're looking at Deadpan for a future film. And then we're going to have to do Hogs Swallow Hollow. That will be a nice place. Are you going to go looking for a location that is Hog Swallow Hollow?
I hope somebody, if not myself, somebody else will do that, will be wanting to do that. My hope is that the role of Dwight Bridges, Richie, I think it's an attractive role that maybe a bankable actor will want to play, and maybe that'll help get the ball moving on the film.
Yeah, but when we talk about bankable actors, please, I'm going to tell you right now, do not get a Jewish actor. Do not get a Jewish actor. You have to get a non-Jewish actor, because that's the only way he's going to appear through the development of the movie Jewish. It would be a mistake. Everybody would say, "Oh, pick one of these hot Jewish comedians." No, you don't want that. You want a real person who turns in.
I don't know. It is. There's a story about Dustin Hoffman and Laurence Olivier. They were shooting this William Goldman picture. I forget what it was called years and years ago. It's the one with the dentist. And Dustin was playing a scene with Olivier where Dustin Hoffman's character, had been up for several days, hadn't slept in several days. And so Dustin, to keep it authentic, had stayed up for several days. And when they actually got together on the set, he kept forgetting his lines. He couldn't hit his marks. And Olivier always got it on the first take, and he was having to do it over and over again. And Dustin Hoffman said to him, "I'm so sorry, that I'm messing up here." And he explained that he'd been up for several days, that he likes to do that so he can really get authentic about the character. And Olivier said to him, "Oh, really? Have you ever tried acting?" It's why I think that a non-Jew or a Jew, just a good actor, should play that role. I believe in. I don't. I'm anti-genre. I think there are just two genres: good movies and bad ones. The really great movies mix humor with adventure and drama and so on. And I think the same way about it. You think of a comic actor. It's just a good actor. Comedy is particularly difficult to do. I think the most difficult of all. And my sister was an actor. She was really rather a movie star. She played, her name was Jessica Walter. My late sister, I miss her every day. In her later career, she was Lucille Bluth on the legendary Arrested Development. And she's become a meme, more than a legend, like an icon, still years and years later, still having her image appear in the media. But in her early career, she was playing dark and bad people, murderers. Her big first early picture was Clint Eastwood's first directorial outing, Play Misty for Me, in which she plays a murderer. So I like to think there's just good actors and bad actors. And good actors, they don't seem like they're acting. And the bad actors do. You can just see they're watching themselves and trying to call attention to themselves rather than really be what you need to be, which is invisible.
You have to take on the character and be the character and convince us,
yes,
the watcher.
Yes.
We believe you are who you say you are, just as we believe in Rick in Casablanca. Mm-hmm. Of course, for this book, all books have a theme or a purpose, but in this case, this book has a particular purpose. You're talking about a subject that's very important. And when you think of what today is, today we are on the edge of, or on the brink of, perhaps peace in the Middle East. But the problem with anti-Semitism is that it is growing. And how, I don't know if this book will change any minds, but what do you feel about it? What do you hope will come out of that? But what are we going to do? How do you get through to people? Because it's getting worse, not better.
Yes, it certainly is. And I feel like I hit the sweet spot. I just worry about in life. I just worry about the future for my kids and my grandkids. But what I'm trying, again, I wasn't trying to say this when I wrote Deadpan, but I see that it's what I said. At the end of Deadpan, the guy suddenly, he becomes like the most powerful Jew in all of history. And who's that? That's Jesus. He takes the blame, as Jesus does, for everybody else's sins. What I was trying at the very end of the book, and what I realized, what I said was that, and I'd like to hope that this is part of the answer to what you're looking for, which is that we have to realize that we're all of us somewhat bigoted. It's the nature of the human. I think people have to be aware of our own bigotry and suppress that and pay attention to this broader family that we belong to. Not our religious family or our racial family, but the human family. There's so much more that connects us to one another than separates us from one another. I am not a Christian. I'm a Jew myself. And I have no trouble saying that Erica Kirk, what she did was so beautiful, to embrace love and forgiveness and the connections between. She really is showing the way. You can disagree with Charlie's politics, you can disagree with her politics, but can't you celebrate the beautiful Christian message that she preaches? I was invited, I've done a lot of public speaking over the years, And about 15 or 20 years ago, I was invited to an evangelical Christian conference in Chicago. 500 pastors gathered from all across the nation to meet and discuss the subject. Why was I invited? Well, because it was about narrative in Scripture. If you look at what Jews call Torah, what Christians call the Old Testament, Muslims call it the Hebrew Bible, just like the New Testament and the New Testament for Muslims, which is the Quran, there's advice, there's commentary, there's observations, but mainly it's stories. And they're not comforting stories. They're not reassuring stories. If you read, I was just happened to be reading Genesis again. Why was I doing that? Because there's a graphic version of it by R. Crumb, the comic master from 50, 60 years ago, a genius.
The name of the book is Deadpan, and you have a website, Richard Walter.
Yeah,
Books.
You can go to just go to richardwalter.com. You can also get it the usual places, sometimes even in bookstores, certainly at Amazon. You go to Heresy Press on the web or Skyhorse, or just go richardwalter.com, plug in my name or plug in Deadpan, and it'll pop up. I promise you get a giggle out of it.
Oh, yes. There's lots of there's a lot of funny stuff in the book, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Definitely. And of course, as I said, I hope that you will come back and we can spend an hour talking about essentials of screenwriting. And you have...
I'd love to do that. I would be delighted to do that at any time.
Because, as I said, it is a book for screenwriters, those who dream of screenwriting, and definitely for novelists, because you cut to the chase. So many books about writing novels, it's blah, 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 blah. But you cut to the chase. You give the essentials. And that's the important thing when it comes to writing.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm only going to let you go on like this for an hour and a half. No, okay, I'm grateful for those kind words. Thank you.
Okay, it's going to be fun to talk to you, and I'll get in touch with your people and my people. That's what I say in Hollywood.
Please do.
Your people will get my people, and we'll all get together.
There you go.
And then we'll make it happen.
Yes.
In Hollywood, we make things happen, right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
That's it. That's a special thing about Hollywood. You're just fantastic. Really, thank you so much for joining me on Joy on Paper Live. And I've been on the radio for over 10 years and on YouTube now for just over a year. And it's lots of fun to be able to see my guests. So thank you again for joining me.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Just ring that bell. Thanks.